Hello there, everybody. Welcome again to another episode of the Adult Autism, a Spectrum of Uniqueness podcast. I'm glad that you're able to make it here today. Well, have you ever heard of the term interoception? It's a fancy word that has to do with our ability to sense and understand what's happening inside our bodies. And it's similar to a thermometer, where a thermometer tells us how warm or cold it is outside. Interoception lets us know what's going on inside, how our bodies are feeling, or what condition or state our bodies are in at any given point in time. It's like, what's my body telling me? And this is a sense that we rely on to make adjustments to get us back to an optimal level of being if we're feeling, say, overstimulated, or if the opposite is the case and we need to ramp things up for stimulation and motivation purposes. Could be as simple as noticing rumblings in your tummy, which is a familiar sensation because it's one that happens when you're hungry. And so you do something in response to it. You fill your tummy with a I don't know, peanut butter sandwich or a salad or yummy M&Ms, whatever suits your fancy at the time. Another person might notice their muscles tensing and their heart pounding when they enter a room with lots of people because this is threatening to them for whatever reason. And even though there might not be a true threat, their body's telling them, hey, you, get ready. Something's about to happen. Okay. So essentially, interoception is a sense that usually operates in the background of your awareness to monitor what's happening in your body and sends you signals, normally physical type signals, so you can decide what you should do to experience comfort or more generally a regulated state or to meet the demands that are being placed on you that are creating a dysregulated state, which can be minor or major depending on the situation. An important part of this process is your perception or your interpretation of your body's signals, which you may not always interpret accurately or even perceive for that matter. In other words, it's possible for a person to be overly sensitive to signals that their bodies are sending to them, or undersensitive, or simply not to perceive the message in a way that aligns with the true purpose of the signal. It's like they have a distorted sense of those bodily messages if they're aware of them at all. Some of my clients have talked about having a vague sense of how they're feeling and not being able to pinpoint exactly how or why they're feeling that way, and maybe not being entirely clear about the quality or of the feeling. Like a person could be having a sensation in their chest that they previously experienced as an unwelcome, anxious type of feeling, but there's nothing going on in the situation that would cause them to feel this way. And so they're they're perplexed as to what's going on. And at an unconscious level, their brain is asking itself, what do I make of this sensation anyway? I mean, the person may not be able to decipher what they need in the moment to feel settled, or the opposite, to feel amped up or stimulated. Now, it's not uncommon to hear autistic people talk about having a lack of clarity about their interoceptive experiences. In fact, an Australian autism researcher by the name of as Emma Goodall talks about this and speculates that it could be trauma related. But it could also be due to a lack of awareness of what's going on in the body based on a person's neurological makeup. Now, other autistic people experience the opposite issue, where they're overly sensitive to everything that's going on around them, and find it hard to kind of back off from sensory stimulation. So The challenge might be figuring out what all of the sensory information means for the person and how they should deal with it moving forward in order to get to a regulated state of being. What our bodies are telling us can sometimes be deceiving, and it's not always easy to put a handle on what's going on, which can obviously be, disconcerting. When neurotypical people see an autistic person become dysregulated, like if they're yelling or stimming or shutting their eyes and putting their hands over their ears, they might see this as weird and even undesirable. And in fact, not so long ago, the thinking was this kind of behavior, needs to either be contained or extinguished. Yet that person may just need something different to achieve a sense of calm or balance. Because it's difficult for, the average Joe to understand the inner experience of autistic people, they might disregard what's happening or just think that, they're strange. But there's usually more to it than that when an autistic person becomes dysregulated. And the fact that autistic people can't always communicate their experiences to other people, the behaviors they display, many of which are nonverbal, don't provide them with the validation and support they need from other people. Another challenge, I think, is for autistic folks is to develop an awareness of interoceptive cues that their body is sending to them and to figure out how they're related to their, quote, normal regulated state of being and a dysregulated state as well, even if that dysregulated state is something more minor, like hunger pangs. Now, there's some real concrete ways anybody can become more aware of this kind of stuff, like temperature, I think is a good example, because your body reacts to stressors depending on who you are by either getting warm or cool, and it's probably signaling you that, hey, pay attention to me. And so, if a person wanted to become more aware of temperature sensations as a cue that they might be getting into a dysregulated state, they could practice by placing an ice cube in their hand and experiencing all the sensations that the ice cube is producing in the body. And then contrast this with the feeling of warm water running over their hands. Another thing that autistic people can do, which is similar to trauma informed treatment, is to do a body scan where they focus on a particular area of the body, maybe the face, and spend time noticing sensations or anything that might be occurring there. Things that they might normally overlook. And then moving on to another part of the body, maybe the chest, and so on and so forth. So they do this throughout the entire body. And of course, this takes time to learn how to do it first, but it becomes much easier and faster with practice. You've probably heard that before. So, when it comes to self regulation, this is all about being aware of what's happening inside your body, either physically or emotionally, and taking the necessary steps to meet your physical and psychological needs. You hear about how autistic people experience like sensory overload when they're exposed to, loud noises. And so this is where they might wear noise canceling headphones to block out the sound um, and to stay regulated. And maybe this is something that you've done before. I know I've seen more and more people wearing them in stores, airports, and even at autism conferences, which is cool. Or the person might notice that they're feeling fatigued and hungry. And so in that situation, it's a matter of eating something to put something in the fuel energy tank, so to speak, to get to a state of physical regulation. It's not much different than a toddler who's, learning how to sense a full bladder to signal them to go potty, right? So some people have an easier time figuring this stuff out than others. It's easy for a person to not be aware of some initial subtle signs that their bodies are sending to them and only pick up on what's happening when, they've become dysregulated. So in other words, when it's too late. And so the idea is to learn how to become more sensitive to those initial physical cues of dysregulation, um, understand how they might be related to different physical or emotional internal states, and to take measures to do, whatever's necessary to address them in the moment, to prevent things from getting out of kilter. So being able to sense when you're, just feeling a little off from how you usually feel, that's the key, if you can do that. Now, for some people, not being able to predict what's happening or going to happen in certain situations, that can trigger physical responses like chest tension, increased respiration, that kind of stuff. That can lead to feeling disrupted inside, which might cause an autistic person to do different types of things depending on their personality makeup. Maybe they do rapid fire questioning of another person because they feel like they need answers to things to settle themselves down. On a physical level, they might feel restless and tense, and maybe they start breathing fast because their brain senses a threat or danger for some reason, like I had mentioned before. And this demonstrates how the brain and the body work in conjunction with one another. In fact, the way a person interprets their bodily sensations may determine whether they stay in a regulated state or become dysregulated. So keep that in mind. Here's a good way to think about this. Think of a roller coaster. When you ride a roller coaster, your body anticipates what's about to happen when you get to the top of that first climb. You, your heart, your heart is going boom, 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 really fast. You start taking short and shallow breaths, and your muscles, tense up. For me, I'd be clenching onto that lap bar for dear life. However, the way you interpret those bodily sensations, that varies once again, depending on your personality makeup. Where one person would interpret those sensations in the whole roller coaster experience as fun and exciting, where another person, not so much, might interpret those exact same sensations and the experiences as dangerous. You know, what did I get myself into? I want off, that kind of a thing. So, to sum all this up, I think the goal for an autistic person is to first just identify what's happening in their body sensation wise. And of course, the more they can do this in the moment when it's first happening, the better. And then, secondly, to communicate their need or experience to someone, if that's necessary, to get themselves or keep themselves at a level psychological plane, whatever that looks like for them. In some cases, the person may be able to do what's necessary to self regulate, but in other cases, they might have to communicate their needs to another person and maybe um, do some co-regulating. And by the way, one useful thing that an autistic person could do in a case like this is establish a private hand signal with a particular, you know, autistic person or neurotypical person, whether it's their partner or friend or someone else, like maybe raising their fist up into the air to let that person know that they're dysregulated and can't interact with them verbally at the moment. Whatever it is, it can be anything. But I think an important thing for an autistic person to learn is to listen to their bodies and understand that it does get easier to become aware of sensations and what they all mean. Now, this can be a frustrating process to develop this keener awareness of this stuff. But as with most things in life, practice makes perfect. I'm sure you've heard that before. Okay, well, that's all for this episode of the Adult Autism, a Spectrum of Uniqueness podcast. Just to let you know, I've included a link in the show notes that you can click on to access a document that I developed that'll help you develop a better understanding of common bodily sensations that are associated with different emotions. And hopefully, um, that'll help you learn how to regulate your emotions a little better if that's something that you kind of struggle with. Well, I hope that you learn some useful things in this podcast episode. And as always, remember your uniqueness is awesome. Thanks for joining me today.